Damn, we got a good episode. Hello everybody and welcome to another video. My name is the Goldman and today we're gonna talk about the Mandalorian, the Book of Boba Fett Chapter 5 and why it was so amazing. I have been critical of this series so far, yes, but I cannot deny how amazing this episode was. So the episode begins with our favorite Mandalorian Din Djarin back. A question that I had after the Mandalorian Season 2 was, what would Mando do going forward? Would he find a new job? Would he resort back to bounty hunting? Well, it turns out he went back to bounty hunting. Before we get into Mando himself, I want to begin by talking about the world building, and then I will focus on the character development. The world building in this episode was fantastic. The new location we got, which was a Halo ring in Star Wars, was not just clever, but it felt right. It felt like Star Wars. It was run down, had diverse groups of people, had an upper class area and a lower class area. One of the reasons the original Star Wars movies worked so well was because George Lucas always knew how to find a balance between a science fiction world and a world that feels poor and run down. Tatooine was the perfect embodiment of all of that, and this episode just adds to that idea. This is a smaller aspect of the world building that many may not appreciate, but having Mando take a transport, if you will, where he has to put away his weapons and ride with other passengers is so trivial, but it grounds the Star Wars franchise. Star Wars always works best when we can relate to what's appearing on screen, and we can pretty much all relate to sitting on a bus or a plane just staring out the window. I know we saw the Pikes get off these transports in Chapter 5, but seeing Mando board the transport, go through security, and then leave cemented its realism in the franchise. The world building of the new worlds, and I guess the transportation, was done great, but where the episode really shines is with the Mandalorian culture. I always talk about how this new sect of Mandalorian culture is so interesting because it's far more strict than the Mandalorians we are used to. When you have these subcultures of a main religion or culture, if you will, it adds depth and realism that everyone can empathize with. If you look at any group out there, whether it's a political party or a religion, not everyone under that umbrella is the same. With, say, the Democratic Party in the United States, there are the more moderate liberals and there are the more progressive liberals. The two groups fall under the same political affiliation, but they differ in a lot of ways. If you look at Judaism, there are 3 different denominations, each one varying in how strict they follow traditional rules. With Mandalorian culture, it's no different. We got the original Mandalorians we have seen in the Clone Wars and Rebels who take off their helmets all the time and they don't have these cultish sayings like this is the way. And then on the other hand, you got this Mandalorian creed that can never remove their helmets and they follow other strict customs like making Beskar into armor and not weapons. The reason I bring these different subcultures up is because we finally get answers to the Night of 1,000 Tears. From the perspective of the Armorer, she blames Bo-Katan and her clan for losing Mandalore because they lost their way. It's very similar to the way a more religious denomination would look down upon a more relaxed denomination. Having the Armorer give her thoughts on Bo-Katan and her family adds politics to the Mandalorians that will culminate in the next time we see Bo-Katan. Seeing the other Mandalorian Paz Vizsla challenge Mando to a duel emphasizes the attention to detail the creators of this show have. It's happened so many times in the franchise where a semi-obvious plot point was sitting right there and the writers just never capitalized on it. Favreau knows the lore of the Mandalorians. He knows the Darksaber once belonged to Tar Vizsla, and he knows that his character in the show is a Vizsla. It only makes sense that he would want to challenge Mando for the right to wield this family heirloom. The attention to detail is one of the key elements of this show that keep the hardcore fans invested, and this episode only double downs on that. I want to transition now into talking about Mando himself. If there's one lesson I learned from this episode, it's how great of a character Mando is and how we kinda didn't show him the respect he deserved. Grogu was obviously the star of The Mandalorian. Once he was introduced in the pilot, everyone became hooked instantly. A lot of us questioned if Mando could carry his own show without Grogu. This was a valid concern, but after seeing this episode, I can confidently say that Mando can absolutely do that. I didn't realize how much I missed his character. Mando is probably the most relatable character we've gotten since Luke, and he is always wearing a helmet. We see him go back to his old ways, going back to what he knows best. This was an aspect of The Force Awakens that a lot of people hated, but I personally loved. When Han and Leia lost their son Ben to the dark side, they both regressed back to what they did well. Han went back to smuggling, and Leia went back to being involved in a paramilitary group. This may have been disappointing to see our favorite characters go in this direction, but it's realistic. dynamic, and that's what I appreciated the most. Mando goes back to his old job, and we see him kinda fed up with it. He gets injured again, and he walks back to what he thought would be his new home and just collapses. I think anyone with a job can totally empathize with finally getting home and just wanting to completely lay on the ground and collapse. I was so happy to see Mando injure himself when fighting with the Darksaber. It's never particularly stated, but we all know a lightsaber can be a very dangerous weapon that someone who is inexperienced can hurt themselves with. To the best of our knowledge, Mando has only ever used a sword one other time. Little details like this may not seem like much, but when you get a bunch of them, you will 100% of the time relate to the character more than if they had not been there. And yes, people who hate the sequels will say that Rey should have had a moment like this too. And I agree, it would have done a lot to make more people appreciate her character. This may not be revolutionary writing, but Mando misses Grogu, just like how we miss him too. It's relatable, and something we can all empathize with Mando about. If I had to choose a moment from this episode that was my favorite, it would probably be when he was sitting on the transport. As I stated before, I appreciate the world building here, but what made me really appreciate this again is the direction by Bryce Dallas Howard. One of the criticisms I've had of the series so far is that I don't feel the show has done a great job of making me understand what Boba Fett is thinking at times. There's one scene in chapter 3 that I thought was fantastic, but other than that, there hasn't been a moment where the story stops and you get to take a look into Boba's soul. I don't know if this is because of the acting of Tamora Morrison or the directing of Robert Rodriguez, but it hasn't worked for me. This scene on the transport yet again showed us how much Mando misses Grogu. Was it a little on the nose how obvious the wrapping looked like Grogu? Yes, but the scene is still effective in making us empathize with this character. The rest of the episode was overall a lot of fun. The curly-haired lady is funny, and I usually appreciate her presence. For anyone who's a fan of The Phantom Menace, boy must you have loved this episode. I don't know why, but seeing the pod racing location didn't annoy me like chapter 5 of The Mandalorian did, with all the A New Hope callbacks. I will say this though, based off of the end of this episode, it looks like we're gonna go see Luke again, and I swear to God, but we're gonna see Luke in his academy. If there is any chance we're gonna see a little Ben Solo running around, I'm gonna lose my mind. I'm not saying it has to happen, but if we're going to Luke's academy, there is always a chance. Oh my god, you guys don't understand how hard I would freak out if that happened. Of course, the elephant in the room is that this episode did not feature Boba Fett at all. If you want to hear my thoughts on that and why this is kinda a big problem, then stay tuned for my next episode where I cover the topic, which is on the right of the screen if the episode is out. Or check out this video I made on Cobb Van. Thank you everyone so much for watching another one of my videos. Don't forget to unite the Claude Squad, and I will see you guys next time.